tonight. And, Brother Rich, would you pray for us, brother, please?
Lord, we just thank you for the safety you provide for us to come to your house, Lord. We just ask you to those who are unable to be here, and ask you to Megan if she isn't ready to travel. She is traveling, Lord. Saturate in our hearts to have what the pastor has for us tonight. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother. You may be seated. Our announcements in the bulletin, everything's how it is. Youth rally coming up, ladies retreat coming up here at the end of the month down in Kenai, and so you can avail yourself to that. Again, if you're going down or would like to go to that, and you thinking about housing or something, Miss Pam McClellan offered there's she has some extra room. It sounded like it was the only stipulation you had to bring bedding because it's in a house that's been kind of it's all cleaned out, ready to be sold, and so I got rooms, got space, everything, got all the stuff, but so you'd have to bring like a mattress, air mattress or something, sleep bags, that kind of thing. But you can check with Miss Ann if you're interested in that. She said she would take those questions. Tonight we're going to watch a little video, not right now, but right for the message, and we'll share a little bit, and then we're going to take some testimonies. We'll have a couple of young men get that couple of handheld mics to be kind of like Pie and Praise. Not so much the praise, just more testimonies. It's going to be kind of different, but we talked about this morning, and so our younger people need to hear about some of these things and see some things. It's not all fun stuff to look at. It never is when people lose their lives, but it is. It's just it's a grounding thing, but it's where we're losing moorage and our moorings.
Yes.
You lose moorings, it's not good. That means things are adrift and they can just go. There's no control anymore. And there's no reason for why you do or not do something where you don't have things where everybody can come together on. And so we don't want to lose this one, and it's something that's taken place where many of us have experienced it. But it's been 20 years, so there's a lot of people, almost a whole generation in our country that hasn't. I don't know what it's talking about. Is we have this in history class, and I would be really interested to hear what somebody who's think about it now, right? So in a couple of years, there'll be teachers coming out of colleges that were never part of it. They were part of it. Oh, you're 9/11, another thing. And so we'll talk about that tonight. Share a little bit about that. We'll have a Preacher Boy Date, another Preacher Boy Date set here before too long. Gonna be in November. The fall's creeping up on us. It's gonna be here, mission stuff, and it's just gonna fly. But enjoy it. The turning of the leaves is quick here, but it is pretty. So enjoy that. It's good to see Miss Dieta this morning, and it sounded like that was a lift for her. And it sounded like the grandkids finished her off this afternoon, so that was good. But that's what you need. I said the therapy you need is also what's going to do you in. So it's just kind of rough for a while, but just keep praying. Long road, keep praying. Sound like Aiden's hockey stuff's going, so that's good. Just keep praying for the Finches, and we'll just keep plugging along. Some more songs.
All right, page 369. 369. I know the Bible is true.
things you do in our daily lives.
Amen.
Please help us to understand you and know you better. In Jesus' name, amen.
Page 410. 410? Nope. 355. There we go. I got it written down. I'm just not reading it. 355. What a friend we have in Jesus.
turn over to where we finished this morning's Deuteronomy chapter number 32. Deuteronomy chapter number 32. And we preached this morning on choosing to remember. And we looked at a handful of things that Moses asked the children of Israel not to forget. One's where God brought them out of Egypt. Another thing is that as they came out of Egypt, they provoked God. A bunch of them wanted to go back. Another thing was how their enemies got after them, the Amalekites, and that they were going to, God was going to work to have Israel erase their remembrance from the earth. And then lastly, here in verse number 7, in chapter number 32 of Deuteronomy, the Bible says, remember the days of old. Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Young people, especially tonight, this service is not say just for you, but it is a lot for you. There's a lot of things that as young people we don't understand. That's why it's so important that we ask people older than us about things, because we have the experience of living, have the experience of years. The Bible says here in verse 7, ask thy father. Okay, you can ask mom too, but it's saying, hey, ask your father, right? Mom was there. Sometimes it's always interesting asking mom. She might remember it just a little bit different than how dad remembered it, or have more details. So, amen. If you got better details, it makes for a better story, or maybe the two stories combined to make the better story. But anyways, we need to ask. The Bible says, he will show thee thy elders, and they will tell thee. Okay, so been slaves for almost 500 years. God brings them out of Egypt, and there's a whole bunch of people that don't want to be where God wants them to be. God says, all right, I'm going to let you die. After all those people die, he says, here you go. Here's this land that I've made for you. You got to fight all these battles. I'm going to help you clear this land of all these heathen people. But this is going to be where you're going to live. This is going to be your place. And if you're going to do well, you need to follow these. You need to follow this guideline that I have set for you. And so Moses can't live forever. He's going to die. And so he has Joshua, and he trains Joshua. And Joshua says, all right, everybody, we're going to listen to what God told Moses, right? And he told them, this is what we're going to do. And everybody said, that's what we're going to do. But eventually they get to a place where they said, we're not doing that anymore. We're not doing that anymore. And it wasn't the older people that said, we're tired of doing everything God's way. It was the younger people that said, we ain't doing it anymore. We're going to do our own thing, and messed everything up. Our country is full of young people that are making poor decisions, and not necessarily because of their age. It's, they don't have anybody older saying this is, or they've been taught, just question everything. Don't be against this stuff. And they being taught to be against our country. You don't want to be against the country you live in. It does not make any sense. It won't help you. I mean, you think about these people that, I hate America. Why would you live here? Right? That's one thing we don't understand. It's like, why would you live here? Why don't you go live somewhere else? You don't really believe it, I don't think. Don't really believe it like you think. You got some value in your speech there, some shock value or something. I don't think you really believe it. Otherwise, you would pack up and go. But you don't, right? So they stay, and they live frustrated, and they're just frustrated, angry people. If you don't love your country and you don't love God, I don't know what, it's like, well, why would I live? What's my reason for existing? And those people probably ask that question to themselves as well. Events that have happened in our time are very important. They help shape who we are. They help shape our identities and our thoughts about things. And as we grow up in America as an American Christians, we sit in a unique spot that a lot of people in the world don't get to sit in. A lot of Christians sit under persecution. They're born under tyranny. Okay, that's all they know. Right? We talk about freedom and say Christianity. That's like the only freedom they know. Their everyday life isn't necessarily freedom. You live in India, you're born into the caste system. If you're at the bottom of the caste, you're stuck based on who your mom and dad are. Doesn't matter how hard you work. In America, though, if you work hard, hey, I can rise from the bottom and climb to the top. It's one of the great. It's why a lot of people want to come here, even today, even still today, right? Because they can still do those things. And so these events that take place, if we remember them, okay, they help us. If we forget them, it hurts us very much, because the Bible and history both teach if we forget things that have taken place, we will go in and do the same thing over again. Okay? It says if we forget our history, we'll repeat our history, and there's some things we need not repeat. We do not need to repeat living godless. We do not need to repeat living in Egypt over again, in a sense. We don't need to do that. What happened 20 years ago on September 11th, which was yesterday, is we're going to show just a little snippet clip. It's just a few minutes. I think it's maybe 4 or 5 minutes clip. The president at the time was George W. Bush. His voice, you'll hear his voice. You'll see him. He was our president at the time. He's not my number one person in the world, but I just, like President Trump said, I'm so glad he was our president at the time instead of a lot of other people. Very, very, very thankful for that. He's served in our military patriot. But anyhow, we're going to watch some of that. Some of the pictures, you look at it, you're like, that's kind of scary looking. That's kind of this, kind of that. But we need to see it, okay? When we're done, we'll get back up and give you time. And we will, I'll have you two help me, okay? And we'll pass the mic. We're going to listen to the adults talk tonight, okay? All I want is you to talk about where you were, what you remember, the feelings you felt, those kinds of things. And we're going to get a good perspective of it and help us remember some of these things that have taken place. So we'll go ahead and play that at this time. And when it cuts to black at the end, Sam, you can just kill it. There's a few seconds at the end when it turns black.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight, I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
The President of the United States, when he is in many respects needed most.
People running into them, going up to help people, and I don't see a lot of that there. There's a lot of people that got cancer and different things from the dust and the debris, and have died in years since then. But there's just a whole lot of, it touched everybody touched people around the world, and so I just want to hear it a little bit tonight. We got some time. It's got a couple of verses to share. When we get done, we just want to give people a chance to talk about it. It's all right if you choke up and cry. It's okay. But I want it to mark our kiddos here tonight, and for us to see. So anybody want to share? And again, just remember what you remember. So it doesn't have to be just say, hey, I was here. It's 20 years ago. So you could say, we'll do the math. You're 20 years younger than you are now. Probably had some other things going on. And may have been in a totally different place, but one of the things is, like, all I know about you, especially our young people, what we know about you is right now. We think that you've grown up here and you've forever been here, but 20 years ago, you could have been somewhere on the other side of the world or something like that. So if you don't mind sharing, and you don't have to share, and if we end up not getting a lot of people to share, that's fine too. But I just want to give you the opportunity tonight. So if anybody like to share and say where you were 20 years ago, what you're doing. Are you green? Okay, green. Yeah, and then just, yeah, okay. Yeah, and then just
I
point
probably
it
don't
at your.
need it, but I'll use it. I'm from New York City, so this is home for me. I get emotional every time I talk about it. We were in Guam. Megan was 2.5. The twins, we didn't know yet, but they were in my belly at the time. It was midnight for us in Guam. We'd just gone to bed, and our phone started ringing. It was my neighbor, who was still awake and had the news on. And he said, Corey, something's happening in New York. There's a plane that hit a building. So Rich and I jumped out of bed, put the TV on, and we just turned it on and watched as the second plane hit the second tower. My dad worked downtown, so I didn't know if he was there. He delivered mail for in between different buildings. So I didn't know where he was, so I was trying to get a hold of him. I knew my mom wasn't over in Manhattan, but I got a hold of them, and they were fine. Got a hold of my grandmother, and she said, because the lines going into the city were backed up, so it took me about an hour to kind of find out everybody was okay. So we saw it fall. We just sat there in shock when it happened. And then Pastor was just saying that, people died from the stuff. You guys know Bubba. His father was a fireman, and he was one of the ones that was sent there to try to find all the bodies and do all the looking through the rubble. And he did die from 9/11 smoke and debris and all that stuff. So, I mean, you guys know him, so that's kind of personal to all of us. So that's where we were. That's what we remember.
Brother Don Chandler.
Well, I wasn't in New York City, thank God. I had just gotten to work, hadn't been there very long, and my boss called me. And asked me if we had the radio on at work. And I told him no. And he said, shut down all the machinery, gather everybody up, and turn on every radio in the building. We're at war. Very scary. And made me very angry. I was already old at the time, but if I could have enlisted, I know now how the people felt after Pearl Harbor. I hope nothing like that ever happens again.
Every morning when I get up, I'm a news person. That's the first thing I turn on. Tom too. So we turn on the TV to get ready for work, and I thought it was a movie. We saw the first plane go in. I'm like, we look at each other and go, what? Is this a movie? What's going on? And then we saw the next plane, and we were like, oh my gosh. So I went ahead, we were just in shock. We just sat there in shock. And so I went ahead and finished getting ready, thinking I'm going to work. So Tyler was 3, and Tom usually get him off for school, and I usually go on the base because there's a lady that was watching him because I worked at the BP building. So I was driving, got Tyler ready, and the traffic, couldn't even get on base. Got to not near the main gate, and the traffic was way back. And it's like, well, I guess I'm not getting on base. And find out you couldn't get on base. So I just turned around, came home, and then, let my work know, and then glued to the TV the whole time. And I was like, I just couldn't believe what we were watching. Later on, I asked my brother, my brother's an air traffic controller in Florida. And later on, I asked him, he said that was the most unprecedented thing they've ever done to try to get every plane down. And they did. But he said it was like chaos to try to get every plane, because he worked in Florida. And he said, because I was like, because then you wonder, well, because then they were grounding all planes. And then I asked him, he said, you just couldn't believe what was going on in there. But they tried to get every plane close to a runway to land, because they didn't know whether there was going to be more planes going in buildings. But and then, of course, watching it after and seeing the people and all the firefighters, the 300-something firefighters, and the people jumping out, and it's like, it had to have been so bad to jump out 90, 100 stories to your death. It had to be that bad inside. And still to this day when I watch it, it just brings tears to my eyes. And then when you hear the people, and people who have gotten out, and the people, the families that told of the people who, just go up there and they do their job. The police officers, the firefighters, the first responders, that's what they do. They just go and try to help people regardless, and it's sickening to hear in the last few years what's going on with people not supporting our police officers and our first responders and stuff like that. But, so yeah.
Yeah, like Karma was saying, we got first thing in the morning, TV first thing it was a routine, and we saw the first building burning, and just sitting there, just wow, you know, just the reaction, and what can you say? Then all of a sudden we saw that second plane hit. And then, I mean, I'd never forget something inside you just drops, and it just, because you feel helpless, right? There's nothing you could do. And, you know, and we just, I didn't go to work that day. I just stayed home. Like I said, Carmen went, and she couldn't, you know, do what she needed to do. She came home, but, and it wasn't too long after that, we heard a third plane, and it hit the Pentagon, right? And by this time we're saying, what's going on, right? And we hear the news reports saying they're trying to get all the planes out of the sky, right? Because they think there's more of them up there, right? You don't know where they're at, who they are, how many they're at. You just don't know, you know. And as we know now, there was 4 of them, and it just, the entire day was really, for me, it was just total shock. I was just shocked the entire day. You just don't believe it's going to happen to us. You know, we've all seen movies and stuff, like Don mentioned Pearl Harbor, right? And that was then.
Yeah.
You know, you never think it could happen today. Well, guess what? And you young folks, this is for you. It can happen today, right? What happened 20 years ago, we can have something similar to that today. In an area that we wouldn't even imagine it would be. Who would have ever thought they're going to take commercial planes, fly them into these buildings to harm as many people and kill as many people as possible? I guarantee you probably, you know, even our intelligent people never even thought of that scenario. You know, I mean, and even today, there's people out there thinking about things that I guarantee you none of us in here, it would even cross our minds. But that day, you know, it was a big thing back there in New York, where everything happened, and in Pennsylvania. But it had a big effect on Alaska. You know, right away they shut down all flights. There was no airplane in the air. You couldn't go anywhere. Right? And as a result of which, I mean, at the time I was in food sales, right? What brought me my income was restaurants. Well, guess what? There's nobody going to restaurants. There's no tourists coming into town. Restaurants, you know, nobody was even going out to restaurants that were here. Nobody was going out, right? And it's like, you know, so what happened 4,000 miles away had a big effect on us here in Alaska and our economy up here and the people here. She lived in New York. They know people there, right? And I'm sure other of us here know people back there. I mean, that really had an effect on the entire planet. But even so, when something happens somewhere else, it can hurt us and have an effect on us here too. And it's even today, you know, Carmen mentioned, you know, we watched a lot of the remembrance stuff.
Yes.
I think Saturday I was pretty much tied to the TV, you know, for most of the day. And it does, if it doesn't bring a tear to your eyes, then there's something missing inside of you, I think. But because those were people, just like you and I. All right, there was kids, little kids that their mother or father didn't come home that day.
Yep.
You know, there's the police and the first responders that we vilify now because they pulled me over and gave me a ticket for going 10 miles over the speed limit. But these are the same people that if there's an issue, they're running towards that problem and not while you're running away from it.
Yeah, yeah.
And we need to stop that. Biggest thing, just, and I'm glad you're doing this, don't ever forget. Don't ever forget. You have a responsibility, young ones, to continue to learn about that day, right? Learn who was responsible, right? Learn as much as you can about it. You know, learn the names of the people that we lost. Yeah. You know, learn their stories. There's some great stories about children that and what they're doing today with their lives, you know, as a result of that accident. Tuesday's Children, I think it's what it's called, Tuesday's Children. You know, these are kids whose parents never came home, but now they started this organization to help other kids just like them. You know, and they've been able to expand it to our military families who've lost their parents. Stuff. It's just just the different things. And I told Carmen, when I think about that, I think of when we have these forest fires. And you look at the devastation of the forest fires, everything's all black, and wow, it's terrible. Well, a week later, you walk out there, and what do you see? You see new growth. You see a flower popping up. Pretty flowers. Are you kidding me? Where's this coming from? Well, out of this terrible tragedy, there's always something new coming out. But the biggest thing is, just don't ever, ever forget what happened that day.
I'm the father. I have a lot of vivid memories of that day. 9/11/2001 fell on a Monday. We had just here at the church finished a 4-day meeting with Brother Jim White. If you don't know Jim White, you've missed a great deal. He preached here Thursday through Sunday. We had 2 people saved. A lot of people at the altar, and it was a great meeting. Jim was the kind of preacher that either make you sad, mad, or glad. And when you left, you were either one of those 3. I remember he stayed at our home Sunday night. He was very tired. We all were. And we had a plan. We were going to go to bed. The next day, Monday, we were going to sleep in. And we were going to go out to eat for lunch. And then he had to catch a plane Tuesday, I think, 2 a.m. or something. So we were just going to take the day off and relax before his next meeting. And a little bit after 7 Monday morning, I heard the phone ring downstairs. And in a few minutes, Dieta came, and I was still in bed, and she ran in. She said, "You need to get up, come downstairs." She said, "I think we're at war." And I was just waking up. I what? I just couldn't get a hold of that. And I didn't shower or shave or anything. I just went downstairs and turned the TV on. And the first tower was on fire, and all kind of information was coming through, and I'm trying to get a hold of what's going on. And at the same time, Jim's wife called him from Ohio and told him the same thing. And we got downstairs about the same time and just sat in front of the TV and tried to figure out what in the world is going on. And not much was said. We just watched and listened. And my first remembrance or first thought, I don't understand how the media, the news works, but it appeared to me to be orchestrated. Tom Brokaw, it just sounded like he was reading a script. This has all been written down beforehand. And then it wasn't very long till the second plane came in, and all the TV cameras were in the right position to film this. They got close-ups, and it was just like a Hollywood movie. And I looked at that and I thought, how can, in this short amount of time, can all these people come together and these TV cameras be in the exact right spot? I remember this aircraft was in a descending turn to hit this building, hit it perfectly, and exploded, and you could see the airplane through the windows, the fire moving through the windows and exploding out the other side of the building. Just unbelievable. I never experienced anything like that. And I thought, this can't be true. It just can't be. And we continued watching, and the first building collapsed. Some of these pictures, they showed on the 6 o'clock news. Those people jumping. They said they were trapped above the flames, burning. And they decided instead of burning to death, they just jumped. I remember, I think it was the same picture of one man was upside down, coming down backwards on his back. And his hands out like it's over. In a few seconds, I'll be at peace. I remember my stomach just turning over. I felt nauseous. I couldn't believe that it was happening. And we just stayed glued to the TV all day. And I think about 3 or 4 that afternoon, I went, took a shower, got dressed. About 4 or 5, Deetta got a big meal and we ate. And then at 6 o'clock, we went back to the TV. I had more news about the last airplane in Pennsylvania that went down the field, but they were conflicting in report. Nobody knew what was happening. And so somebody suggested this, somebody suggested that, and it was all speculation at that time. Nobody understood anything. But one thing that struck me was when the first building collapsed, and this is a little odd, but Tom Brokaw, if you remember Tom Brokaw, but he has the voice. That's what I call it. He's a newsman because his voice is just that what's needed. But his voice was very monotone and very matter of fact. And as he explained that building collapsed, in my mind, I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there's a documentary about the Hindenburg disaster. You remember that back in the 30s. And there was a lot of tension in Germany and things at that time before the war started. But the Hindenburg flew to New York and landed and then caught fire and exploded. And they had it on the radio. It was these airships were really big deals back then. And the announcer, and I did some research and looked that up, and I can never remember the man's name, but anyhow, he was explaining over the radio the landing of this airship. It was novel, and all of a sudden, there was a flash in the back of the ship, and it caught fire, and he just, emotionally, he was so excited, and tried to explain what was happening so you could picture in your mind, and the fire spread and the ship began to crash into the ground. And he got so emotional that he could not speak. And I remember some of the things he said, terrible. He used the word, he said, people, it's just terrible, it's just terrible. And he used the word humanity. He said, it's just, the humanity of the thing. And he got so emotionally overwrought that he said, I'm sorry. He said, I can't go on, I just can't go on. And for some reason, that popped into my mind. I've seen that clip 2 or 3 times. And comparing that to Tom Brokaw, Brokaw said, well, the building collapsed and 1,000 people got crushed to death. And I'm thinking, what is happening here? And it seemed to me that America had lost its heart. We could not feel alive any longer. Another thing that Brokaw said, that the world as we know it has changed forever. And that has turned out to be true. I feel very uncomfortable in this world. I feel like a freshman in high school. I don't know what's right or wrong, what's cool, what's not cool, which way to go, what to do, what not to do. It's just very confusing to me anymore, and it seems over the last 20 years it's been that way, and it continues to get worse. But 3 things I took away from this. First of all, this happened quickly. There was no preparation. I remember when I got out of high school, I went to work for the Navy. And the majority of the people that I worked with in the Navy, I was a high school kid, 80% of the people I worked with were World War II vets. And I listened to them, just like tonight, telling personal experiences of World War II. But World War II gradually built up. America did not want to get involved in the war with Germany. And so there was time for us to prepare in our minds and our hearts that this is coming, this is coming. But with 9/11, there was no preparation. We just woke up at 7 o'clock and we were attacked. And it happened quickly. And it seems like ever since then, things have happened quickly. I turned on the news one night and the newsman said there's a worldwide pandemic. And I really am embarrassed, but I didn't know what a pandemic was. I had to look it up. And it just, when did this happen? Well, just quickly, just happened real quickly. There's no time to prepare. And then, as I said, Brokaw said the world has changed forever. And it continues to change. And we don't know what to prepare for next. And then lastly, I see a whole lot of comparisons in 9/11 and the 20 years following with the book of Revelation. If you just read all the way through Revelation, I'm not one of those doomsday guys and prophets and all that stuff, but I see that there is great confusion. We're confused. As soon as, or well, not that day, but the next day and the days following, the conspiracy people, they were pouring on the news. And this and it's the government's fault, the government's involved, and this, and that, and there. And there was all kind of information, or what we call today misinformation. Everybody was spinning everything, and nobody really knew what to believe. What's true? Why did this happen? Who did it and why? And so confusion. And that's what we have today, and it just continues to grow. And so what do you do? And is it right? Is it wrong? Do I go this way? Do I go that way? I don't know. The information I have, I don't know what to do. And that brings about discouragement. People are discouraged today. I think people are really looking for the truth. But where do you find it? Where do you look? You read this guy, and you read the next guy, he says just the opposite. You watch this TV program, they say this, the next one says, no, it's not like that, it's different. And after 20 years of that, people are just discouraged. And I think all this is coming together for the end times. Right after 9/11, I just spent a lot of time on my knees. I didn't know what to do. And I came to this conclusion. It's not about us. It's about Israel. Keep your eye on Israel. Jesus has written all this down for us. If we just read our Bibles, it's about his people. It's not about us. We can play a big part if we would, but our leadership doesn't seem to want to go that way. So just keep your eyes upon Israel. And that's my memory.
Amen. Got time for a few more?
Looking into a couple of different perspectives of what occurred. I remember when that took place, essentially being 25 years old, and at that age where instead of having that, what's going on mindset, it was more an immediate, what's our response to this? It seemed like right after that took place, I remember driving into the law firm that I was working at, and having this mindset of like, something's not right about this. That's just, people just don't fly planes into buildings. That's not an area where you would have something flying that low. This just isn't something that would happen. And by the time that I got to work and got the law firm open, I went up to turn on the news, and within probably 10 minutes of my getting there is when the second plane flew in, and it was an instant knowledge. This is not an accident. And at that point, up until that point in time, you didn't know. Up until that point in time, wow, what must have happened? What failed in that plane? What occurred, that this took place? And then instantly having that feeling and the knowledge. And it's almost funny because we had just come through, these aggressions that were taking place, with Saddam Hussein and all of these different kinds of things. And it was instantly this mindset of how could somebody perpetrate that type of terroristic activity here? And at 25 years of age, I'm like, what are you going to do about it? I was angry. It wasn't a matter of like, get them back. It wasn't one of those things. Oh, we got to go and get them back. It was an anger that you had for somebody, and you had a suspicion of who it was. And I was thinking Saddam Hussein right off the bat, and ultimately it ended up being Bin Laden. But then, as you were watching those things transpire, I remember the shock. I remember the fear. I remember all of those different things that were going on. But I was looking around the law firm, and I was looking at these different individuals, where they were in life, what was going on. And I remember thinking there were other individuals that were my age, and they were talking about instantly, they were wanting to go and sign up. Something's up. We need to stand forward, and we need. And like Brother Don was mentioning, the aftermath of that, how many individuals went and enlisted because they knew that something was going on. That's what happened in World War II after Pearl Harbor. You could not. There were so many individuals who stood up to enlist that literally they were backfilling jobs, with those who couldn't go on to war. And I remember at that point in time, because I was contemplating going into the Navy, I was trying to determine whether or not I wanted to be an attorney, and if I was going to go that route, I was going to go through the JAG program and do all these different kinds of things. And at that point in time, that was practically a lock. This is what you need to do. And in the course of that, I saw the attorney that we worked for, and he didn't know the Lord. To my knowledge, he doesn't. I witnessed to him on a regular basis. But I remember seeing Mr. Henson and this utter despair that was, and I had a calmness about me. And the more I watched, the more I started realizing what was happening. He was concerned about the economic aspect of it, because that was what was important to him. The man lost more in that hour financially than I've probably made in my lifetime. When that took place, and that it kind of dawned on me that what it was probably like during the Depression, when the stock market crashed. And that was another one of the fears that people had. We're under attack. This is taking place. Our stock market's going to fall there. And people were concerned about their livelihood. Brother Tom mentioned that. People aren't going out to eat. People aren't going out and doing these different kinds of things. And then after that took place, you have this lack of direction. It seemed like there was a unity that filled that gap almost as quickly as it came. Churches started filling up. People had a bend towards the things that they couldn't answer. And they were coming to churches and they were asking pastors, what's going on? What's the Bible say about this? And then there was a unity. You saw a yellow ribbon wrapped around trees. You saw flags flying, and it was the exact opposite of what you saw during the Vietnam. People were signing up and people were enlisting, and you saw individuals that were my age that were taking it very seriously. And honestly, it was one of those things where it was a dark moment followed by a very bright light. You saw individuals coming together and realizing, I don't necessarily know what's going on, but I'm going to be a part of whatever it is that we're doing moving forward, because this evil can't be allowed to continue. And for the kids that are in this, you've not known anything other than this. I remember literally the day before that, if I would have gone to the airport and I was going to fly somewhere, my family, every single one of my friends would walk up to that gate for fun. You could just go and sit and you could watch planes fly in and fly out. And literally, it was an enjoyable thing. People traveled differently then. It was enjoyable to travel. Literally overnight, you had to go through security. And I will say at that time, it was rightfully so. The simplicity of what those attacks is what made them so effective. They didn't sneak on guns. They didn't sneak on, bombs. They didn't sneak on any of those things. Individuals went and took lessons on how to fly these planes. Mind you, they didn't learn to land them. That got pointed up. These individuals were taking classes, and all they were wanting to learn was how to fly, because they had no intention on walking away from that. And that gave you a mindset about your enemy at that point in time. The depths that they were willing to go to do those things, and what drives that individual. And it's not a mindset we as Americans up till that point in time really understood or really wanted to understand. And then you started to see individuals thinking, their plan was so simple. They snuck box cutters with glass blades in their pockets. They wouldn't have been able to detect that even with a metal detector. But I will say, remembering that moment and starting to hear some of the stories coming in of the individuals and the heroism on those planes. The plane that went down in Pennsylvania, people knew what was happening. They saw what was going on. They saw the stewardesses there being killed, and they weren't going to let that happen. They stood up. They fought back, and they took that plane down in an empty field. That's a courage that I've had to ask myself on more than one occasion. What would I have done? I remember sitting on planes, and the thought goes through your head, what would you do? What would your response have been? The first plane, they probably didn't have any idea what was going on. It took off in less than an hour. Wasn't even that long after it took off. They really didn't have time to react. But for those individuals, they thought about it. They knew what they were. We are going to die. They were calling individuals, and they were saying goodbye. But at the same time, when we turn around and we look back on that event, you don't know what you're going to do in the moment until you're there. But the Bible tells us that, Daniel purposed in his heart. He did that a long time before the event took place where he was going to be tempted with the food that Nebuchadnezzar or the Assyrians were going to be providing him with. And it dawned on me, I've got to prepare myself now for what I'm going to do in that kind of an event. What am I going to do? And only how you view the invisible can you do the impossible. And I think there was a lot of individuals who were playing at church and playing at those different kinds of things that had a different perspective on what they believed and why they believed it. And I do believe that moving forward from that time, for all these individuals that join the military and things of that nature. There were some who went in there with the wrong mindset. There were some individuals who went in there wanting to, hey, we got to get back. We got to, and I'll tell you what, they paid a price for those kinds of things. War is not something that you go into flippantly. But I will say, the individuals who did go in and signed up and sacrificed their lives, they sacrificed their dreams and aspirations. Most of those individuals, we're going to go on, we're going to do this for a job. And they found themselves in the military, going over there fighting against people that, wanted to do harm to not only them, but their own people. It was eye-opening. But I think one of the things that encouraged me was just to see people realize that there is a greater responsibility. There is a greater desire to see good from a tragedy. And I think, for the most part, that's why a lot of people went and enlisted, because there was a need that was greater than their ambition or their dreams. It was something that was bigger than themselves. And I think that was one of the things that you see, that greatest generation. We are far removed from that. But there were so many individuals that stood up, answered that call, and have literally given their lives in the defense, not because these people are on our doorstep knocking, trying to, but because they could. And I think for the first time, people began to realize it's not going to be this wave that we're going to have the opportunity. Literally, these were quick attacks, and literally they were done in a manner to inflict the greatest amount of fear possible. Because that's the one thing that, as Americans, we really couldn't defend against, is our own fear. And we're seeing that played out even now. We fear what we don't know, what we can't control, and what we can't really respond to. And we've seen that played out ever since then. How do we respond to this attack? How do we respond to these? I don't know, we've had how many different viruses that have popped up, the swine flu, H1N1, and now even now. And honestly, this is one of the questions I've asked myself. You have things that were manufactured in a laboratory. I don't know that anybody's even debating that anymore. But the fact of the matter is, we're arguing amongst ourselves, really, as to, you didn't get this, or you didn't get that, or you're not, and it seems like, nobody's asking the questions like, why are you chemically engineering viruses? What's going on? Why are they, and no, where's the outcry against that? Oh, we're more concerned about, we want to make sure people don't get this. Okay, well, what are we doing about the people who are creating it?
Yeah.
It's the same mindset. I think our response then was the correct response. Our response now is one of, we've got to be reactionary. We've got to be in fear. And the Bible says we don't have a spirit of fear. We are operating in confusion, which creates fear, which isn't something that we ought to be doing. I think right after 9/11, we saw someone stand up and take leadership, and exact leadership, and there was a direction, a unified direction. And I don't see that anymore. I see a lot of people just wondering what to do. What's the best approach to this? How do we do this? And we argue about what the right track is, and then nothing ever gets accomplished. And that's why I think so many people are looking at this as being the end time. Because, if you're in one of these situations here where you don't know what to do, you're constantly going to be living in a state of fear. And for those who know the Lord and have direction, these can still be some fearful times, but at least you have a hope and a knowledge that the Lord is soon returning. But if you don't believe that way, you've got a lot of questions. And I think that's one of the reasons why what we're doing in church even now is so important. You have a hope that other people don't have.
Yes. Yep.
We still have the best superpower,
Yeah.
our military. We just have idiot people
Yeah.
running it right now. Amen. So, yeah,
Amen.
even though we know God's in
Amen.
control, but we still are a superpower.
Amen.
And we're still the greatest country, and our military is the best.
We got a good taste of what leadership was. Well, it's not. It's crazy how sideways you can get in just a short amount of time. But it was almost like unbelievable. It's like, man, that's what we need. It's interesting to me, like coaching and stuff, and been reading books, different coaches, reading one on Vince Lombardi now. And Vince Lombardi's Catholic. He go to church every day. But his quarterback told the reporters, yeah, if you heard him at practice, you know why he has to go to church. I mean, that's what they would say. Yeah. He didn't like that about himself. But the leadership, like, this is where we're going. And you just don't. Hey, there's going to be people that don't agree, but at least we're going somewhere. This isn't leadership. Or saying, oh, it's so-and-so's fault, or that's not leadership. Or flippantly saying the buck stops with me and lick your ice cream again. I mean, that's not leadership. So a couple of verses, we're done tonight. We'll let you out. It's warm in here and it's quarter after, but we're going to thank you so much for those testimonies and those words. I know many of you probably want to share as well. Where we live in the Tri-Cities, there's a chunk of twisted steel that's stuck in a piece of concrete that was a part of one of the towers. They cleaned up for years and years and years. They stored a lot of that material. I was driving in, I asked my wife, I said, see if you can figure out how many of those. So there's over 2,600 of these in the U.S. So you travel and you see it. Hardly any of them in big cities. All in little rural communities, little cities, little places. And they're monuments. They'll have different things written there. They stored that material for 10 years trying to figure out what do we do with all this. They will say, we're just going to go chuck it in the trash. And 28 of Proverbs 22 says, remove not the ancient landmarks which thy fathers have set. Why? It's so we can remember. Not that it's pretty. I've seen it, you've seen it. You've walked someplace and seen some guy that got paid $1 quadrillion to make this sculpture, and it represents something if you interpret it right through the right piece of plastic paper and the sun's just right and all this, and you can understand all things. But I'm like, what is this piece of junk, right? Oh, that's art. Oh, okay, I get it. All right, put that up. Makes no sense. But you see these other things. They say, the statues have been taken down. Talk about all those things. Say, look, it doesn't mean you're for it, but you learn from it. You learn from those things. 23:10 says, remove not the old landmarks, enter not into the fields of the fatherless. There's things that have been set up for us that help tell us which way to go.
Yes.
Which way to go. And again, it's towards the problem. It's not running away from it. I was reading a story. I was driving back, so we played Soldado, and we got done at like 10, when did we get finished? I think I left there at 9 o'clock, drove to Seward, picked up a boat, took a nap, got up about 3, sat up in my truck, and drove home. So I'm listening to the radio. There's only one radio station in all of Alaska on AM, and that early in the morning. It's a sports talk, whatever. I hardly ever listen to it. Anyhow, I was driving up, was listening to this kid, grew up in the Bronx, Mets and Yankees guy, just talking about the things, different things that go on. And he's a few years older than me. And talked about all the, it's just interesting hearing his take on things. I was at Eastern. I was in my sophomore year. We woke up. We went in for meetings that morning, and we didn't watch Idaho State. We're supposed to go Pocatello play football that weekend. Nobody played that weekend. Nobody played hardly the next weekend. Nobody knew if they were going to play the next weekend. They just didn't know. Like, stuff stopped. It affected everybody. I remember talking to Brother Harvey, and he said, brother, he's like, there's flights, Roman, there's 100 stranded all over this state, right? Because you fly out, hour, whatever, go across the inlet, get dumped off in the woods. You got food and water for however many days. If you're a bad hunter, you still only have food and water for however many days, right? It's like, We need to get out of here, right? And you think, oh, well, like Brother Thompson, we're so far removed, but it affects everybody. You see one of those markers somewhere, take your young person and say, this is what this is for. That's why this was here. When I was in high school, they have a Vietnam traveling wall. In our honor society, it was part of a project. They set it up. All we did was help people find their names, the registry. People come and do that. You're 17, 18. You don't. I don't get it. Like, I don't know. When I got a phone call, my buddy I played football with in high school got killed in Afghanistan. I'd understood it real quick. And his twin brother was over there too, and it was just like, yeah, I was crushed, man. I was crying. Those kind of things, I just cry and don't stop crying. It just kills me, and I'm just like, oh, my soul. Got done working, drove up for a memorial thing for him. It's hard. It's tough. But don't forget, my soul, don't forget, man alive. People want to make light of those things. And you get, in 10 years from now, young people, when you're 18, 20, and some pinhead says something smart, oh, we should just get rid of that. That offends me. That offends me. You have no idea what that represents. You have no idea what you're saying. No idea, right? And we want to remove these things, and we do not know where to go. So how do we go forward now? As we hold the line on the landmarks. And you just keep preaching, you keep swinging, right? You keep going. You keep doing the things you're supposed to do and be the normal person. Don't worry about fitting into other people's normal, okay? You just be Bible and do what you're supposed to do, what God asks us to do. And God's in control of what goes on, how these things turn. And I'm with preacher, right? There's a little tiny country over in the middle of the sand on the edge of the Med. That's what matters to God. His church matters to him, but that's what matters to God. And even if we get a leadership from Israel that doesn't have good relationships, we don't write them off. We don't write them off. But somewhere down deep, those people know. It's like if we do these things kind of work. And when we don't, oh boy, there's consequences for it. But we need to remember. We need to choose to remember. We'll sing our song invitation tonight. We'll let you out. And thank you so much for listening to our testimonies tonight. It's a different service. I want our young people to be able to hear it and experience it. 3:16, as I have decided to follow Jesus. 3:16. We'll stand tonight. If you'd like to come and pray, for our nation and pray for our leaders, altar's open tonight. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back. No turning back. Would you